Hello everyone and welcome to video tutorial 22. You should now all know about variation and you should be able to pause the video and answer the question. So try to answer the question before I go over the answers. The question is, the following diagram represents part of the family tree showing the inheritance of hitchhiker's thumb, where the thumb can bend back as shown below. It says complete the table below for individuals A and C. So you've got individual A, B, C, possible genotypes and phenotypes. It then says, in a survey of 90 students, it was found that 25 of them had hitchhiker's thumb. Calculate the number of students with straight thumb to hitchhiker's thumb as a simple whole number ratio. Then the last question says, the predicted ratio was 3 straight thumb to 1 hitchhiker's thumb. Explain why the predicted ratio was different to the actual ratio. So the answers are, so firstly, we need to work out what is happening in this tree. So what characteristic is dominant and what is recessive. So we've already been given individual B's genotype. So B is either big T or big T little t. So we know that the black circle represents the dominant phenotype, which would be straight thumb, because it contains the dominant allele. So we can then now say that all of the white ones, which have got hitchhiker's thumbs, are going to be recessive. All of them are going to be small t, small t, small t, small t. And now we need to work out what A and B are. So because the recessive form of the gene comes up in the offspring, they have to be both heterozygous, so capital T, capital T, small t, so that they can form the recessive allele. Because if you cross anything else, you wouldn't have the small t, small t. It would be all big T, little t, and big T, big T. So it's got to be two heterozygous, which gives you your famous 3:1 ratio. So that would mean this one would be big T, little t, and then this one would be big T, little t. So we can now fill out what A's possible genotype is, which would be big T, little t, and we can figure out what little t is, because it's a white circle, so it's going to be hitchhiker's thumb. So we've got big T, little t, and hitchhiker's thumb. So well done if you managed to get that correct so far. So the next question, we know that a total of 90 students were surveyed and 25 of them had hitchhiker's thumb, so we need to work out how many were straight thumbed. So you've got to do 90 take away 25, which will give you 65. So then you'll get a ratio of 65 for straight thumb and 25 for hitchhiker's thumb. And then that is not in its simplest form, so both of these numbers can be divided by something because they both end in 5. They can't be divided by the smallest number because it gives you a ratio and we want a whole number. So if we divide this one by 5, we have to divide this one by 5. We need to make it the simplest form. So this then gives us a 13:5 ratio. So well done if you managed to get that correct. Then it says the predicted ratio was 3 straight thumb to 1 hitchhiker's thumb. Explain why the predicted ratio was different to the actual ratio, and for that question you had to remember that every time that this comes up, that you need to put that fertilization is a random process and it involves the element of chance. So well done if you managed to get that all correct. If you didn't, you need to go back and watch video 21 again. Today we're going to be moving on to looking at plant transport, which is part of key area 5. If you want the worksheets to go with the video, remember to pause the video and go to 2 multicellular, 5 transport system and plants, 2 consumables and activities, and the PowerPoint is found in one PowerPoint and is called 5-point plant transport systems. Our learning intention today is to state the plant's organs, name the different types of cells in the leaf and state their function, give details of the structure and function of the xylem and phloem, state the parts of the plant involved in water transport, explain how water moves from the soil through the plant and into the air via transpiration, and describe the structure and function of the stomata. To be successful, you'll need to be able to name and label the different parts of the leaf cell and state their function. You'll be able to compare the structure of and function of the xylem and phloem, explain how osmosis and transpiration are involved in the movement of water through the roots to the leaf, state how the root hair cell is adapted to help with the above process, describe the structure and function of the stomata, and analyse different polymeters. You should have looked at organs already, and we should know what organs are, so pause the video and try to write down what you think an organ is before I go over the answer. So if you put that an organ is a group of tissues working together to perform a particular function, then well done. If not, then you need to go back and watch the cells to tissues to organs video. So plants have 3 organs, which we should already know about because we already did it. So they have their stems, their roots, and their leaves, which are all organs. You need to make a note on this, and you need to know that leaves are the main site of photosynthesis. They contain different types of cells to help them perform photosynthesis efficiently. You need to be able to label each part of the leaf and know what each region does. So we have first of all the waxy cuticle that's found at the very top and the very bottom. And the waxy cuticle cuts down on water loss for transpiration. We then have the upper and the lower epidermis. These are transparent cells and they allow light to pass through and they're used for protection. Then there is the palisade mesophyll layer, which are this layer here. These cells are specialized because they have a large number of chloroplasts, and they are the main region of photosynthesis because of that. Then there is the spongy mesophyll layer. You can remember it's spongy because if you imagine a sponge with big holes in it, that's kind of what it looks like. So the spongy mesophyll layer, it's got rounded cells and contains many air spaces, so it allows gases to circulate. And it is the second region of photosynthesis because they contain chloroplasts. Then we have the leaf vein, which can also be referred to as the vascular bundle, which is made up of the xylem and phloem. The xylem carries water and the phloem carries sugar. So they're your transport vessels for sugar and water. Then we have these little holes. The little holes are called stomata and they let the gases in and out. For photosynthesis to occur, obviously you need carbon dioxide. And finally we have the guard cells, and the guard cells are at the sides of the stomata and they control whether the stomata opens and closes. So you need to make sure you know each part of the leaf before you move on. Let's test how well you manage to know the different parts of the leaf. So pause the video and try to label all of the parts of the leaf before I go over the answers with you. So the first one we're going to look at is the very top arrow, which is the waxy cuticle. So well done if you managed to get that right. Then we're going to look at the second one, which is here, and the third one, which make up your leaf vein or vascular bundle. So the inside is always a xylem vessel, the outside is always a phloem. And then we've got a part that's quite an empty space, so that would be your air space. And then we've got the hole that's at the bottom, which would be your stomata. And then we've got the parts that surround your stomata, so they open and close it, which would be your guard cells. And then we've got it pointed to this part here, which is your lower epidermis. And then we've got at the top your upper epidermis. And then this layer here, which contains lots of chloroplasts, would be your palisade mesophyll layer. And then this layer below it would be the one with the holes that look like a sponge, would be your spongy mesophyll layer. And then lastly, you've got your lower epidermis. Well done if you managed to get that all correct. If you didn't, then make sure you learn how to label the leaf because it does come up. Now you should be able to label the parts of the leaf with their correct function. So pause the video and try to fill out the table before I go over the answers. So the answers are that the waxy cuticle cuts down water loss by evaporation. The upper epidermis is a layer of colourless cells that allows light to pass through, and it's also for protection. The main region of photosynthesis, and these cells have many chloroplasts, would be your palisade mesophyll. It contains many air spaces to allow gases to circulate, would be your spongy mesophyll layer. And for protection, these cells have no chloroplast, would be your lower epidermis. And then it controls the opening and closing of stomata, would be your guard cell. And then pores through which gases can move in and out would be your stomata. And then contains the xylem and phloem, which allow materials to be transported in and out of the leaves, would be your leaf vein or your vascular bundle. So well done if you managed to get all of them correct. If you didn't, then go back and watch the first part of the video again. There are two types of transport vessels in the plant, one of which is the xylem and the other which is the phloem. The xylem transports water and it's always found in the inside of the plant because it's got rings of lignin in it, so it strengthens the plant in the middle. And then the phloem's always found outside of the xylem. So you've got your phloem, your xylem, which make up your vascular bundle or your leaf vein. So your xylem's always in the middle, phloem's always on the outside. So these run up the stem, they also run up the root. So again, you've got your xylem on the inside and your phloem on the outside. So xylem transports water, X is nearest W in the alphabet, and phloem transports the plant's food, which is sugar. So PH, food. So what does a plant need water for? So if you think back to third year, you should know that a plant needs water for photosynthesis, but it also needs water for transporting minerals, support, turgor, and cooling. So why do plants need a transport system then? So plants must have a transport system to allow the water to move from where it is absorbed, which is the root, to where it is needed, so like the leaves. You need to know what the transpiration stream is, and you need to know the 4 stages involved in the transpiration stream. The transpiration stream is the continuous passage of water and minerals flowing up through a plant from the roots to the leaves. So basically it's the transport of water. So if you get asked what is the transpiration stream, you want to say it's the continuous passage of water and minerals flowing up through a plant from the roots to the leaves. So let's look at the 4 stages involved in the transpiration stream. So the first stage involves your root hairs. So your root hairs have a large surface area, which you can see in the corner. So you're going to have your high water concentration of water on the outside and your low water concentration inside the root hair cell. So your water is going to move from the high water concentration to the low water concentration down a concentration gradient by the process that you guys should already know called osmosis. So a plant absorbs water from the soil through its root hairs, and this greatly has an increased surface area for absorption of water by osmosis. Then we have our second stage, so moving from our roots to our stems. So water and minerals pass up the xylem through the stem and into the leaves. So remember our xylem vessel carries water. Then the third stage of the transpiration stream is that water moves into the mesophyll cells, so that would be your palisade mesophyll cells and your spongy mesophyll cells, and it diffuses through the air spaces. The water is used for photosynthesis in your leaf. And then finally, the water evaporates from the leaf through the stomata, which are the tiny holes in your leaf. And when your water evaporates through the leaf, it is called something called transpiration. So water evaporating from leaves is called transpiration. Remember, evaporation is where a liquid changes to a gas. So in this case, it would be water changing to a gas. So make sure you know all of that before you move on. So let's have a look at the stages of the transpiration stream in more detail. You might get asked about how the water is absorbed into the plant, or something about how root hair cells are structurally adapted to absorb water for the transport process. So in the first stage, as we have already said, a plant absorbs water from the soil through root hair cells, which greatly increase the surface area. So that's how it's adapted. It's got root hair cells, which greatly increase the surface area for absorption of water by osmosis. The water moves from cell to cell down the water concentration gradient by osmosis. So it moves from the high water concentration outside the root hair cell to the low water concentration inside the root hair cell by the process of osmosis. So once you're in your root hair cell, it moves into the root cortex cells and through them into the xylem vessel, all by osmosis. And here's just another diagram of your root hair cell. So make sure you know and understand this because it is a common question. So the water then enters the xylem vessel. This is what the xylem vessel looks like. So it's made up of rings of lignin. And the water moves upwards through the xylem vessel into the leaves. It can only travel in the one direction, which is upwards. It travels upwards because there is a pressure involved in transpiration. So when the water is transpired from your leaf and the water exits, it creates a sucking pressure which sucks the water up, just like if you were sucking on a straw. So here is your xylem vessels. So their role is to transport water and minerals from the roots to the leaves, and they are composed of dead tissue. They're strengthened by rings of spirals of lignin, and they are hollow inside, and they help support the plant because they have these rings of lignin. The water can only flow upwards. So let's look at this in more detail and review it. So we have water enters the root hairs by osmosis from the high water concentration in the soil to the low water concentration in the root hair cell. Your root hair cell is adapted because it's got a large surface area, so it can absorb maximum amounts of water. Your water then passes across the root from cell to cell by osmosis and also seeps between the cells. So we go through all these root hair cells and root cortex cells, and then we enter the xylem vessel. So water is drawn up the xylem vessel because transpiration is constantly removing the water from the top of them, so that creates a sucking pressure, which means that the water is drawn upward. So make sure you know that before you move on. So next we have the water is passed from the xylem vessel and into the leaf. So water moves into the mesophyll cells and diffuses through the airspace. The water is used for photosynthesis, so it'll go into your spongy mesophyll layer and then it'll go into your palisade mesophyll layer, which both contain chloroplasts, so the water can then be used for photosynthesis. So pictures of your leaves and showing the cells of your leaf, which you should already know. So remember, water moves from the xylem into the mesophyll cells and diffuses into the air spaces, and the water is used for photosynthesis. Okay, let's move on to the last stage. So the last stage is water evaporates from the leaf through the stomata, and when water evaporates from the leaf, it is called transpiration. So you need to know the word transpiration. So when water evaporates from the leaf. What is the word evaporate? It's when a liquid changes to a gas. So liquid to gas. So transpiration is the evaporation of water through the stomata so from the leaf. So the stomata, remember, are these little holes. So make sure you know this before you move on. Now you should be able to pause the video and fill out the blanks. You can find this diagram in consumables, and you should be able to label it before I go over the answers and write down the definition of the transpiration stream. So pause the video and do that before I go over the answer. So the transpiration stream is the continuous passage of water and minerals flowing up through a plant from the roots to the leaves. So well done if you managed to get that correct. For the first stage, a plant absorbs water from the soil through root hairs, which greatly increase the surface area for the absorption of water by osmosis. Number 2 in the transpiration stream is water and minerals pass up the xylem through the stem and into the leaves. And then number 3 is that water moves into the mesophyll cells and diffuses into the air spaces. The water is used for photosynthesis. And then number 4 is water evaporates from the leaf through the stomata, which is called transpiration. Well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, then go back to the start. So you should also be able to write down the function and the structure of the xylem because we went over it. So pause the video and try to do it before I go over the answers, because commonly you will be asked to label or what the function is of the xylem. So the answer is that the function of the xylem is to transport water and minerals, and water can only move in one direction, which is upwards. The structure is that it's hollow and it's composed of dead tissue, and it's strengthened by rings of lignin. So it's got all of these spirals of lignin throughout of it, and they are lignified to withstand pressure changes as water moves through the plant, which helps to support the plant. So they also help support the plant, and that is why they're always found in the middle. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, then you need to write this out over and over again. So you need to know the definition of transpiration. You need to write it out over and over again so you know it. So transpiration is the process of evaporation through the stomata. So it's the loss of water from the leaves of a plant. So the evaporation of water from the leaves of the plant is transpiration. So write it out over and over again, say it over and over again, but make sure you know it. Now let's look at how stomata and guard cells work. So pause the video and try to use the word bank below to fill out the blanks in the text box. So stomata are tiny pores found on the surface of a leaf. Most stomata are located on the undersurface of the leaf. That's because it offers them protection so they don't end up having too much transpiration or too much being exposed to too much wind. Carbon dioxide enters a leaf via the stomata, and oxygen and water vapor exit via the stomata. Opening and closing of the stomata occur as a result of changes in turgor of the guard cell, and we should know the word turgor from when we did osmosis. So if something is turgid, it means that the plant cell has become very fat and the cell contents are pushing against the cell wall. So we have our stomata, which is our little hole, and we've got our guard cells, we've got our carbon dioxide that we need in for photosynthesis, and our oxygen going out. So our guard cell look like little sausages, so I always refer to them as sausage balloons, and they control the opening and closing of the guard cell. So in the dark they will be closed, so because you can't really carry out photosynthesis, and in the light they will be open. So how do they go from closed to open? Well, if you imagine two sausage balloons together, if you blow them up, they're going to move further apart to create a hole. So water concentration in the guard cell increases and the turgor of the cell increases and the stomata open. So the water will move from the high water concentration on the outside to the low water concentration on the inside by osmosis, causing the guard cells to become turgid. And when they are turgid, then they are open. So what happens when it is dark? So the water concentration in the guard cell decreases and the turgor of the cell decreases and the stomata closes. So this will have the high water concentration and outside will have the low water concentration, and the water will move from the high water concentration to the low concentration, causing the guard cells to become thinner and plasmolyze. so then it will close. So it's like deflating the sausage balloons. If you deflate the sausage balloons, then you should be able to put them closer together. So make sure you understand the stomatal mechanism and how the guard cells control it before you move on. So how do we measure transpiration? Transpiration rate can be measured using an instrument called the pedometer. There are two different types of pedometer that you need to know, which are the bubble pedometer and the weight pedometer. So let's look at them in more detail. Let's look at the bubble pedometer first. So we know that transpiration is when your water evaporates from your leaf. So when water evaporates from your leaf, it'll cause a sucking pressure, so it'll suck up the way, which will cause the bubble to move. So you can calculate the transpiration rate by how far the bubble moves, and usually you measure it on a volume scale by something called a manometer. So as water moves up through the plant, the air bubble moves along the scale, giving a measure of water absorbed by the plant over time, and hence the transpiration rate. So usually beside the shoot there will be oil or there will be a stopper or something, and that is to stop water being lost from evaporation outside of the shoot, because we are only wanting the water calculated that's lost from the leaves, not from the water on the outside of the shoot. So make sure you understand that and know that before you move on. Now let's look at a weight pedometer. So a leafy shoot is put in water with a layer of oil over the surface to prevent the water being lost from the outside, so only the water is being lost from the leaf. So the test tube and shoot are weighed at the start, and then they're left for a few hours and they're weighed again, and then any difference in weight will indicate the loss of water by the shoot, which would be due to transpiration, and therefore you can calculate the transpiration rate. So make sure you understand the difference between the bubble pedometer and the weight pedometer and how they both measure transpiration. There are factors which speed up and slow down transpiration. These are temperature, humidity, wind speed, and surface area. Generally, whatever speeds up drying your clothes if you put them on a clothesline will increase transpiration. So if temperature increases the drying of your clothes, it will increase the rate of transpiration. So let's have a look at this in more detail. So how does temperature affect transpiration? So transpiration increases with an increase in temperature due to the faster evaporation rate of water molecules. Remember, water molecules changing from a liquid to a gas is evaporation. So this will speed up with temperature, and this will make your clothes dry faster. So what about humidity? Would that help your clothes to dry? No, you would not want to put your clothes on a washing line when it's humid, because it would mean that the air is quite wet, so your clothes would end up staying wet. So as the relative humidity of the air surrounding the plant rises, the transpiration rate decreases or falls. This is because it is easier for water to evaporate in drier air than into more saturated air. So as I said, the air is too damp around it. So humidity decreases transpiration rate. So would you want wind to dry your clothes? Yes, you would. So increased movement of the air around the plant will result in a higher transpiration rate. This is related to the relative humidity of the air. So wind moves the air around, which results in the more saturated air close to the leaf being replaced by drier air, which speeds up your transpiration. So the windier the better for transpiration rate. And finally, surface area. You would want to increase the surface area of your clothes. You don't want to rumple them up. So increasing the surface area increases the rate of transpiration. So a small organism such as a unicellular plant or animal has a large surface area in relation to its volume, whereas a large organism such as a multicellular plant and animal has a small surface area in relation to its volume. That's why unicellular organisms, they can just use the process of diffusion for transporting their gases and nutrients, whereas multicellular plants and animals, they have to have whole transport systems for gases and nutrients, etc., to be transported. So we need to know the summary table, and you will get asked about transpiration rates. So your factors affecting transpiration rates are temperature increase, and if temperature increases, the effect of the transpiration rate will be to increase. If humidity increases, then the effect of the transpiration rate will be to decrease. If the wind speed increases, the effect of the transpiration rate will be to increase. If the surface area increases, the effect of the transpiration rate will be to increase. So top tip, when thinking about the speed of transpiration, think about the best conditions for drying your washing. So you'd want a lovely warm temperature, you'd want lots of wind, and you'd want a large surface area for hanging up your washing. You would not want humid air around your washing because it would make it damp. Okay, so make sure you know all the factors affecting transpiration and whether they increase or decrease the transpiration rate before you move on. So pause the video and watch the transpiration and stomata revision and go to the link. You can either do this now or you can do it at the end of the video and come back. So the other vessel that we need to know the structure and function of is the phloem. So as we've said previously, the phloem transports sugar from the leaves to other regions of the plant. Sugar is a plant's food, and you can remember the P as being for an F. So phloem transports sugar from the leaves to other regions of the plant. It is composed of living tissue, unlike the xylem, and it consists of a sieve tube and a companion cell. So you've got your sieve tube here, and you've got your companion cell here. And you'll notice that the sieve tube doesn't have a nucleus, but the companion cell does. So this companion cell controls the sieve tube, and you'll notice that the sieve tube have sieve plates at the end of them, which have little holes which allow the transport of the sugar. So sugar is transported along the strands of the cytoplasm in the sieve tube, and you'll also notice that the sugar can move up and down the plant, unlike the water that can only move up the plant. So it can move down and up the plant. So you need to know that the phloem is composed of living tissues, and it's got a companion cell and a sieve tube. So you can remember that by every companion, like friend, needs a tube, which is just a little method of trying to remember. So companion cells have nucleuses which control the sieve tube. The sieve tube has a sieve plate which allows the sugar to get through. And the sieve is just like a normal sieve. If you were cooking, how you would separate out your particles, like for example, if you had pasta and you wanted to drain the water. So let's look at these cells in more detail. So the cytoplasm can get through the holes in the sieve plate. This allows sugar to be transported through the sieve tubes. The companion cells control the activity of these tubes and they keep them alive. So you've got your sieve plate, your sieve tube, and you've got your companion cell here. So make sure you know the phloem, the function of the phloem, the structure of the phloem, and you can compare the phloem to the xylem. So comparing the xylem to the phloem, the xylem takes water only in one direction, whereas the phloem transports sugar upwards and downwards. So the xylem is made out of dead tissue and the phloem is made up of alive tissue. You've got a thickened wall stiffened with rings of lignin for your xylem vessel. Your phloem is made up of your companion cell and your sieve tube and sieve plate. And it's got little sieves, so little holes in it to allow the sugars to get through. So pause the video and try to fill out the differences and comparison of the xylem and phloem before I go over the answer. The answer is that the xylem is a dead hollow tube strengthened by rings of lignin. It transports water. The direction of the transport is upwards, so water and minerals can only go upwards in the cell. The state of the tissue is dead and its other function is to support the plant. The phloem contains sieve tubes containing sieve plates and companion cells, so that's the structure, and it transports sugar. It can transport the sugar in all directions, and its state of its tissue is alive and it doesn't have another function. So make sure you know this table before you move on to the next part. Let's try to answer some SQA past paper questions. The first question says, the diagram below shows some of the structures involved in a transport in plants. You've got structure J and structure K. Which line in the table below identifies correctly structure J and K and the substance transported by them? So for J, we can see that it's got rings of lignin, which means that it must be the xylem vessel. So it's either going to be A or B. We know the substance transported in J is water, and we know that structure K must be the phloem, because it's got the sieve plates, the sieve tube, and the companion cell. And we know the substance transported is sugar. So the answer should be A, so well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, then you need to go back and watch the bit about the xylem and the phloem again. So the next question says, transpiration occurs from the leaves of a plant. Which environmental condition would produce the greatest transpiration rate? So is it A, warm and still air, B, cold and still air, C, warm and windy, or D, cold and windy? So pause the video and try to come up with the correct answer before I go over the answers. So the answer would be what you want for hanging up your washing to dry. So it would be warm and windy. So the answer would be C, so well done if you got that correct. If not, watch the transpiration part of this video again. So the next question is, the diagram below shows cells from a plant root. You've got your soil particles, your soil water, your root hair cells, and your xylem, and letter P. It then says, describe the uptake of water from the soil by plant roots and the role of the root hair cells in this process. It's a 3-mark question, so make sure you write enough to get your 3 marks. So pause the video and try to come up with the answer for this before I go over the answer. So the answer is that water moves from the soil into the root hair cell by osmosis. So it moves from the high water concentration in the soil to the low water concentration in the root hair cell. And the root hair cell increases the surface area of the root for osmosis. So well done if you managed to get all 3 marks. If not, then you'll need to go watch about the transpiration stream. Then it says, name the strengthening material P that lines the xylem vessel and give one reason why plants require water. So pause the video and try to answer the questions before I go over the answers. So the answer is that the rings of lignin strengthen the xylem vessel. And give one reason why plants require water. You could have put photosynthesis or support or cooling. The next question says, the graph below shows the rate of water gain and water loss. The next question says, the graph below shows the rate of water gain and water loss by a plant during a 24-hour period. And we've got a key here, so if it's a dotted line, it's water gain. If it is a straight line, then it is water loss. So it then says, calculate the number of hours during which water is lost and was greater than 5 grams per minute. So we've got to look at the straight bold line, and it says rate of water gain or loss grams per minute. So we want to go over 5, so there is 5 there, so let's put a line over 5. So where does it first come over 5? That would be 9 AM. And where does it finish being over 5? It would be 9 PM. And how many hours are there between 9 AM and 9 PM? It would be 12. So well done if you managed to get that correct. So 12 hours. The next question says, identify the 3-hour period during which the greatest increase in the rate of water gain took place, and identify the time in the morning that the rate of water gained equaled the rate of water lost. So pause the video and try to come up with the answers before I go over it with you. So the answers would be, we're looking for a 3-hour period which the greatest increase in water gain took place. So we're looking at water gain and a 3-hour period. So water gain would be our dotted line, and we're looking for an increase. So where is it steepest? So that's only from 3 to 6, you're not going anywhere. 6 to 9, you're going up 1 box. From 9 to 12, you're going up 3 boxes. From 12 to 3, you're going up 2 boxes. From 3 to 6, you're going up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. From, oh wait, like 10 boxes. So it's going to be from 3 to 6 because the rest of it is decreasing. So well done if you got between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. The next question says, identify the time in the morning that the rate of water gained equaled the rate of water lost. So it's where the two things overlap, which is 9 a.m. So well done if you managed to get that correct. So describe the process and structures involved in the uptake of water by plant roots and the loss of water through their leaves. So try to pause the video and answer that question before I go over the answers. Remember, it is 3 marks. So the answer would be that water is absorbed by osmosis into the root hair cells, then water passes through the stems in the xylem, the water is evaporated from the leaf in the mesophyll cells, and then transpiration happens through the stomata in the epidermis. So basically your 4 stages of the transpiration stream is what you wanted to write down there. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, go back and watch the transpiration stream. The last question is, transpiration is the either A, evaporation of water from the stomata, B, the uptake of water by root hair cells, C, the transport of water through the xylem, or D, the transport of water through the phloem. So pause the video and try to answer that question before I go over the answer. So the answer is that it is A, the evaporation of water through the stomata. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If you didn't, you need to go learn the definition of transport. So this is just where the SQA questions have been taken. So let's do a problem solving question. So the background of this question says location of stomata. Water vapor also passes through the stomata. It is possible to block the stomata by covering the surface of the leaf with Vaseline. The experiment shown opposite can be set up to show the location of the stomata. The leaves were treated as shown in the table below and then weighed. After 3 days, they were reweighed and the percentage change in weight was calculated. So A has no Vaseline and the percentage weight lost was 12. B has both sides coated and there was 0 loss. C has the upper surface coated and there was 8% loss. And D has the lower surface coated and there was 2.5% loss. So then we'll have 2 questions to answer about that. So from the results of the experiment, what conclusion can you reach about the distribution of stomata on leaves? And why do you think this is the case? So pause the video and try to come up with the answer for both of these questions. It's quite difficult. Right, so the answer is that there are more stomata on the underside of the leaf, and the reason why is because less water is lost when the stomata are blocked on the underside. So it means that there are more located on the underside. So well done if you managed to get that correct. If not, then have a look back at the question and then come get help if you're still stuck. Now you can complete the activities below to review your learning by doing multicellular exam practice questions on page 47 to 52. You can do the plant transport past paper key area questions. You can do the questions on plant transport worksheets and activities which are found in consumables. And you can do the surface area to volume ratio calculations which are also found in consumables. That takes you to the end of the lesson, so you should now be able to name and label the different parts of the leaf cell and state their functions, compare the structure and function of xylem and phloem vessels, explain how osmosis and transpiration are involved in the movement of water through the roots to the leaf, and state how the root hair cell is adapted to help with the above process, describe the structure and function of the stomata, and analyse the different photometers. So well done if you managed to get all of that correct and that you're confident in it. If you are not confident, then you need to go watch the video tutorial again. But that is the end of this video tutorial, so thank you for listening. Woohoo!